Hey guys, this is Steven from Steven's Classic Garage. So I wanted to talk a little bit about this fuel that I've been exploring. So as you guys know, I have a 1979 Rabbit Volkswagen diesel, and it runs normally these cars stock have a 1.5 liter diesel engine in it, naturally aspirated, but the previous owner actually swapped in a 1.6 liter diesel, which is from 80s and later cars. So this car was an inspiration to be purchased because one of my up the street neighbors has a same year 1979 Volkswagen Rabbit with the original 1.5 liter, and his is a 4-door while mine's a 2-door. So I recently bought this, and one of the big reasons is for the gas mileage. So let me go ahead and show you guys. I mean, I have a lot of videos of this guy on my channel already. This one is 1979 Volkswagen Rabbit 1.6 liter diesel daily driver. And I also have, if you guys see on my channel, a 1965 Mustang as well. But so now I used to have a 2014 Ford Focus, and I have since gotten rid of that for this as my daily driver. So I do really enjoy driving this car. If you see some of my recent posts, unfortunately, I was in an accident with it. Somebody hit me in the back on the freeway. So now this panel right here is caved in and broke this right tail light. And that's most recently on my channel. So, and there's my neighbor's Rabbit up there, which is the 1979 Rabbit, sand-colored, original paint, original bumpers. He changed the brakes on it, so that's why it's got bigger tires, but as you can see, it's a 4-door. So, basically what I wanted to talk about in this video, this is my Rabbit here. You could see a lot more videos of it on my channel as I continue to do more when I fix it. I wanted to talk a little bit about this diesel selection that I've tried. So I'm big into green engineering and stuff, as I'm a mechanical engineering student at San Jose State, and I'm graduating in May in a month and a half for bachelor's. So I immediately, once I got this car, I was looking into a possible renewable diesel option. So there are multiple different types of diesel. There's regular D2 petroleum-based diesel. There's biodiesel, which has multiple different facets, like waste vegetable oil, WVO, which is basically from what you see online about those people that are getting this waste fry oil from places like McDonald's or other types of fast food restaurants, and then they filter it and they put it directly in. The regular type of biodiesel, the industrial grade, I guess you could say, biodiesel, is basically that waste vegetable oil, but it's processed into a usable fuel. So it removes all of the extra thickness, because there's multiple problems with biodiesel. Number one with biodiesel is that it's extremely thick and extremely acidic to rubber lines. So usually when people buy it, they buy it in a B blank mixture. So most common is B20. So what that means is that it's a 20% mix to 80% regular D2 diesel, petroleum diesel. And then obviously max is B100, but they have it in different percentages. And B20 is generally the most run because you do not have all these issues with the corrosion of rubber lines or your fuel lines or whatever. And also you still don't get a lot of the other problems. So another problem is that because it's like kind of like a sugar-based fluid or fats-based fuel. It tends to coagulate in cold temperatures, so it tends to thicken, become extremely viscous in cold temperatures, so it doesn't like to flow. So especially with waste vegetable oil, if you don't refine the vegetable oil with chemicals to get all of the garbage out of it can't be burned, or that's not helping the burn, it tends to be extremely thick, and the waste vegetable oil, they'll have heaters on the fuel lines to heat up the fuel in cold temperatures to make sure that it flows right through the lines. And because if it doesn't, it could potentially damage your high pressure diesel pump. So multiple problems with biodiesel, but that's biodiesel's made from plants. And so there's a few places around here in San Jose Bay Area of California that sell that. But I tried a different alternative, which is from a company called Propel. And they make renewable fuel sources. So they have two fuels that they sell: E85, which is an ethanol, which is an alcohol-based gasoline, not diesel. And it's an 85 to 15% mix of, is similar to B20 or B100 or B80 or whatever, where diesel, where the biodiesel is 80% and the diesel is 20%, let's say, for B80. Same deal for E85, ethanol 85 is 85% ethanol and 15% gasoline. They also make what I'm using now, which is called the HPR, High Performance Renewable Diesel. So here's their website, and we're going to get in. I actually sent an email to one of their, I guess, salespersons for the fuel that has a lot of knowledge on the fuel, and he answered a series of questions for me that I will then share with you guys, and I'll share my findings that I have here in this document to what the performance impact is on my car, because I wanted to get some details on it and review my findings. So what's different between HPR is that it's actually refined from animal fats instead of plant-based material. So they call it a biomass fuel instead of a plant-based fuel. It's a biomass, which is derived from animal fats and oils. And basically what this does is it gets rid of a lot of the issues with biodiesel. So this type of fuel does not have any problems with the low temperature issues, and also biodiesel produces a lot of carbon monoxide, a lot of soot when it's burned, while this fuel does not. And so let's go over a little bit of its specifications here. And also we see a little bit of B20 biodiesel, which again is 20% biodiesel, 80% diesel. So this is their fuel specifications, which you can see down here at the bottom. And this is basically a more technical data sheet of this stuff here. And obviously it's renewable, made from recycled fats and oils. And again, here it says it's biomass. So basically, here it is, diesel high performance renewable. So they have this Ceton number. And a Ceton number is very similar to gasoline's octane number, but it's actually inverse. So octane is the resistance. The higher the number of the octane, the higher the resistance to what's called knock, which is basically pre-detonation inside of the chamber. So a fuel has a auto-ignition temperature, which basically means that once it reaches a certain temperature average inside the fuel, it'll actually catch itself on fire without any ignition source, so without a spark or anything like that. So above this temperature, it will instantly catch on fire. And inside of a car's piston, as the piston is rising for a gasoline engine which has a spark plug, as it reaches up towards what's called TDC, top dead center, it will then fire. But sometimes the gasoline, if you're running a high performance turbo engine with a high compression ratio, which means compression ratio is the volume of the cylinder when at bottom top dead center, which is the piston's all the way down, that volume compared to the volume when it's at top dead center and fully compressed. So that ratio is anywhere in a gasoline engine, anywhere from 12 to 1. So that means that it's compressing 12 times, the volume is 12 times bigger when fully open than it is when closed. So basically it's increasing the pressure. Obviously it's not 1 to 1, because what happens is when you compress, some of that energy is converted to heat. And that will come into a second with the pre-detonation. So as the piston comes all the way up to top dead center, from bottom top dead center, it will increase the pressure theoretically 12 times. So if it comes in an atmospheric pressure at 15 psi, or 1 bar as they call it, 1 bar is 1 atmosphere, it will increase to 12 bar or 12 times 14 psi. And that will be your pressure. Obviously, like I said, it's not a linear ratio. It's actually an exponential ratio on pressure increase, and some of the energy is dumped is contained as heat. So as it's compressed, that inefficiency of producing from volume to pressure is increasing it to temperature. And the problem is, as it's increasing with temperature, if you have a high compression engine where, let's say you have a 12-to-1 car and you added a turbo, so now instead of 14 times 12, you're doing 25, because basically a turbo increases that initial pressure of the 14 psi atmosphere. So now let's say you have 20 pounds of boost, which means you're adding that 20 to the 14. I don't know if the 20 pounds of boost is absolute pressure or if it's adding to that 14. I think it's basically adding to that. So now instead of 14, let's say you added 20 with the turbo. Now you're at 25, 30. So now you have 30 times 12. So now you have really, really high pressure, and so obviously you have some waste where that pressure is turned into heat. And if you're running a low octane fuel, you might have problems with pre-detonation, which is the fuel, instead of detonating with a spark, a controlled detonation at top dead center with a spark, or slightly below top dead center. Generally detonate slightly below top dead center, and that's called timing. But let's say you detonate halfway up to top dead center. So the piston's still coming up, and then you have a big bang that basically tries to keep the piston from coming up. And so a lot of times that's very dangerous on the engine. You could break rings, you could break pistons, you could break wrist pins, you could bend the connecting rod, you could damage something else inside the engine, crack the housing, crack the cylinder wall, bust a hole in the head, break your head gasket, punch a hole in your head gasket. All types of bad stuff happens. So octane is basically the higher the number. So you see in the pump the 89, 87, 89, 91. So those are the different ratings. And don't be too fixated on the number. Just think about how they are relative. So basically, the higher the number, the less likely that is to happen. So that's why a lot of race cars they run was like 108 fuel, 108 octane. So it's definitely higher than you could get out of a pump of 91. That way they could run higher compression ratios without having the detonation. Now with diesel, it is actually the opposite. And we know that as Seton rating, which is this number, which is basically the ability for the fuel to pre-detonate. So the higher the number, the earlier the fuel will detonate under a lower temperature. And both the octane number and Seton number are based on the quality of fuel. So the higher the number for the octane, the better the fuel, and the higher the Seton rating for the better the fuel for diesel. So octane, the better the quality of the gasoline, and Seton, the better quality of diesel. So the higher that number, the better the quality of the fuel is. And for diesel, the higher the number, the earlier the fuel will combust under a lower temperature and thus lower pressure. And that means that the fuel will basically start burning earlier inside the cylinder. And that pre-detonation is basically pre-detonation for diesel. And the reason why that is okay is that there's not as much energy content, and it doesn't like bang. It doesn't have like a bang like diesel, like gasoline. It's more of like kerosene for a candle. It's like a slow burn. And so basically you use that slow burn, and thus it doesn't have this quick impact, so it doesn't damage the engine. So basically what happens is that the higher the Seton rating, the longer the fuel stays burning inside the cylinder, and the longer time you have to burn the entirety of the fuel and convert as much of that energy as possible into actual work. So basically you want the Seton rating to be extremely high. It spends more time inside the cylinder, normalizes into a temperature that you could turn into work through the engine cycle, the 4 cycle, and the full burn is achieved, so you're not spitting out any sort of used gas that's now burning in your exhaust, where you can no longer use that energy. So higher Seton rating is a really, really good number. And also it helps with kind of helping with the vibrations of the engine, and also how clean your exhaust is, because you don't want to have diesel still burning as it's coming out of your exhaust. And you could think that the higher RPM you are on your engine, the lower the time that it stays inside the cylinder to burn. And again, diesel burns slower. So the Seton rating will definitely help at higher RPMs, because you're not spitting out so much smoke or coal because of unburnt fuel with a higher Seton rating. All right, so that being said, that's pretty much the only thing I'm going to really explain too much in here. That's the big number that I had to look into to do some research to figure out where that came from. So because HPR is using this different type of fuel, it actually has a higher Seton rating. So it actually has this 65 plus is the minimum. Minimum is 65. But in actuality, inside the fuel, it may vary. Diesel, this is D2, and this is basically a engineering standard, ASTM D975, which is a way of testing fuel, or diesel fuel. It has a minimum of 40. But here's the deal. I think in California, we have to have a minimum of 50 because of all of our smog standards. But I'm not exactly sure if that's correct. But let's just take their word for it that it's 40. So sulfur parts per million, which is a milligrams over kilograms. So here we see that for basically apples to apples, we have 3 times less sulfur from the fuel being put out into the atmosphere, and it has a 7 times less smell. So diesel has that characteristic smell, that kind of smoky smell. It has 7 times less of that smell per volume. And now this is one that I'm going to have to explain a little bit. So another one of the big deals with biodiesel, which I didn't say, is it's very slippery. So it has because it's viscous, it has very good lubricating properties. So basically, as it goes through your pump, it will help lubricate your pump. But the problem is that it's so thick that your pump really struggles. So a lot of your seals and stuff could get damaged because the pressure is higher. In order to pump that fuel through, you need a higher pressure to get the same flow rate as regular diesel. Now, this guy, which I will explain here, is that basically they were able to achieve with this biomass fuel, Propel was able to achieve the same exact standards, which is the high performance is a high performance renewable fuel that meets ASTM D975, which is the exact same standard that they use to test diesel fuel. So basically what that means is that these two fuels are interchangeable. So what Propel was able to do was they were able to find a way of refining this fuel in order to have it be exactly the same as regular D2. So if your car could run D2 diesel, you don't need to add anything in order for it to run HPR. Is what they're achieving here. So if your truck or your car is a diesel, you can run HPR on the same car without any modifications. So what they found is also that it achieves better than ASTM, right? So we have better Seton rating, we have lower sulfur emissions, which is good. We have less aromatic content, which is good. We have a lower lubricity, which is actually better. So lubricity is basically what they have a test of a fluid. So what they do is they have like a hardened steel pin or a regular steel pin, and they put a metal piece that's harder down onto the steel pin, and they will actually run that steel wheel against that pin and look at for a certain amount of time under the same tension, the same time and the same tension for 2 different fluids, and they'll see how big of a scratch They'll use very high precision measuring tools to see how deep of a scratch it will make. Now, if you put this D2 standard D2 diesel in between this pin, the steel pin, and the hardened steel roller, you will see a deeper scratch than if you use a high performance diesel. So you see here, this is basically nanometers, or nanometers, picometers. This is 10 to the negative 6 meters. Very, very small value. And we see that we have doing the same exact test, same exact duration, same exact tension, or same exact force pressing on the pin by this wheel, same test, same everything. We see that we have a smaller scratch than we do on D2 diesel. So that means that the HPR has a better lubricity factor or property. So that means that the thickness should be around the same because it meets D2 standards, but it's actually better for your pump because it's lubricating your seals and lubricating everything inside of your pump better than D2. Now here we have for the emissions. Now nitrous oxide is big on biodiesel cars as it's greater than diesel. So we see here that compared to regular diesel, that is actually 15% less nitrous oxide emissions. So B20, which is generally higher than diesel, as you see 2% higher compared to regular diesel. So technically the HPR diesel is 17% less nitrous oxide emissions than B20 biodiesel. And as you get higher up in the biodiesel content, you emit more and more of this. So as you get, let's say 20%, so this is 2%, let's say 100%, you're producing 10% more, somewhere around there, than regular diesel, as B20 only has 20% biodiesel. So compared to full biodiesel, you're doing about what? Negative 25%. So here compared to regular diesel, you have additional 2%. So to regular diesel, if you're running HPR, you're producing 15% lower nitrous oxide, which is big on biodiesel. Diesel produces a lot of NOx and a lot of particulate, a lot of soot. So here, compared to regular diesel, you're producing 35% less soot, which is the stuff that's floating around in the air that you see when you see sunlight through it. You see all that, the smoke and stuff, that's all particulate floating around, as well as CO2 and that kind of jazz. Now B20 has 20% less than diesel, so even with running biodiesel, you're still reducing your particulate, which is like dirt or soot or like when you burn a log in your fireplace, all that stuff that's there, but it's tiny, it's microscopic, and it causes a lot of health problems. So carbon monoxide, CO, is also a very toxic gas itself, carbon monoxide. So negative 12%, 25%, while biodiesel is about negative 14%. So still better with high performance compared to diesel. And you're in the same, doing pretty good as B20. So obviously, if you jump up from B20 to 100% biodiesel, this will probably be in the same range. So they're similar here, HPR and biodiesel, 100% B100 biodiesel. And then CHGs, which is carbon intensity, which is basically greenhouse gases, CO2. This is greenhouse gases. So it's what produces for greenhouse gases, which is mainly CO2 and methane. So here we have carbon emissions. So here's negative 67% average carbon emissions. So compared to diesel, you're dropping 67% of your emissions compared to diesel, while B20 is 14%. Obviously, if you go to 100, so that's 5 times, you'll be around, I think, in kind of a similar boat. But you have to modify your car in order to run on B20. You don't have to modify your car or your truck to run on HPR. So let's look at some of my findings here as we're getting into the later parts of the video. So here are all the numbers that I've tracked on my car. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 readings, and I have the distance traveled, what diesel fuel it was, and the mileage. So here I had some data that didn't make any sense, like this one here. So some of it has been omitted as definitely an error with writing down the distance or something. So here, D2, we have 400 miles on 9 gallons of gas, 44.5 miles per gallon. So I get on average about 46 to 50 miles per gallon on my 1979 Rabbit. That's one, because of the engine being so small, and number two, because it weighs 1,800 pounds without me in it. So it's extremely light, and that's why it gets such a good gas mileage. And it's manual, so that's where the gas mileage also comes in. So we had 44.5, 57, 46.4, 47.34, 46.24, 46.45, 49.55. So what does that mean? The car has been changed from 14-inch rims to 15-inch rims, so the speedometer is not reading the exact distance traveled, even though it doesn't really matter, because it's gonna still give you the right mile. It's still gonna give you similar mileage when you relate the two to each other. But I calculated that out, and so basically, because I went up an inch in rim size, I'm gonna multiply that distance traveled by 1.07143. So D2 diesel, we have these readings here. This one I ended up omitting. So we got 47.68 miles per gallon, 61 miles per gallon, which I think is definitely bad data, so I deleted that one. 61 miles per gallon is way too much. 49.76, 53.09, and so the average is about 50.176. So this 53 is on my most recent run on D2 biodiesel. But then again, I went on a trip from here to San Francisco, which is about 80 miles round trip, so I think I did a lot of highway, as most of this is mixed highway and street, about 50-50 highway and city. Now for high performance renewable from Propel Fuels, we got a 49.714, 50.725, 49.543 with an average of 49.994. So diesel, so basically you could see the difference here is about 0.2 miles per gallon, something like that. So basically from this, reading the biodiesel actually has 12 to 17% less energy density. Now I'm thinking that this one has actually 8% less energy density, but as you see, that the increased Seton rating basically negates that difference in energy density, of pure energy density. And energy density is when you burn this fuel open flame and you look at how much heat it creates, how much heat can you create out of burning this fuel, and per amount of weight. So that's energy density. How much joules of energy can you get out of 1 kilogram? So when you compare apples to apples, D2 to biodiesel has 12 to 17% more energy density. So I asked Chris, which we'll go over in a second, what the actual energy density is, and he doesn't know the exact number. But I'm thinking it's somewhere around maybe 8%. But because you have that higher Seton rating, we actually have an observed 0.3% difference in energy density. So that Seton rating makes all the difference. So even though it looks on paper that it's less energy dense, you actually gain most of that back because of how the engine cycle works and using the Seton rating for that longer time spent inside the cylinder and that early ignition time. So one of the things that I did a paper on earlier for my senior project class is I wrote a paper about Tesla had an issue with a ban for the Model S in Singapore. And actually, because Singapore has a 100% petroleum-based grid, there's no solar, there's no wind, there's no water, there's no geothermal. So Tesla says that they have a 90 gram per kilometer emission for the Model S. So this is the Tesla Model S. And with these calculations and the data given on this sheet, I saw that mine has about, my Rabbit has about 115 grams per kilometer traveled of CO2 emissions. So as you see, what is that? That's a So that's about mine's about 22% higher. So I have a 22%. So I produce about 22% more pollution than a Model S. And where does the pollution come from the Model S? You might be asking. It's all electric. That would be if you were charging it on a 100% petroleum grid, which here in the United States we have wind and we have solar, as well as hydro water. So, but on a place like Singapore, where it had 100% petroleum-based grid energy production, then I'm producing about 22% more pollution. So that is the big deal, is that if you do go to this fuel, it is definitely a way greener fuel. You get about the same gas mileage, and they price it competitively. Their prices don't move too much. I just paid $3.70 today, while normal diesel's around $3.80 plus. Cheapest place is about $3.70. Sometimes this diesel is like $3.60. They basically price it as cheap as any other diesel. So for the same amount of cost, you could produce 65% less greenhouse gases, less sulfur, less soot, and less carbon monoxide, and also the last one, less nitrous oxide. So for about a minute here, we're going to go over what Chris said here. So Chris LaPlante, which is the person I talked to at Propel Fuels. So basically, the renewable diesel, I did the who, what, when, where, why. So renewable diesel from Propel is produced in Louisiana, and they went public in the market in 2015. So they're currently only shipping in California. Hopefully soon they will go to other states. They have not released any specific data for that right now. There's no biodiesel in HPR. It's made from recyclable animal fats and oils. I need to get this from him. I made a mistype on my cell phone. The stoichiometric AFR, which is basically the perfect air to fuel ratio to get the perfect burn, because eventually I'm going to tune my Rabbit. And again, this is without a tune. I'm probably running rich, and I'm still getting 50 miles a gallon on it. So basically here, what differences it have between B20 and B100, and it says basically here that it's ultra low sulfur diesel, ULSD, ultra low sulfur diesel. Basically, it could run at 100% blend, and it doesn't have any uncompromised cold weather performance, and also has lower NOx production. And so basically what he's saying is that you could run it on your car without any modifications compared to biodiesel. And here he's saying that it has slightly less energy density, but exactly how I found, does not necessarily lead to lower MPGs. I did not get better gas mileage. I got around the same. So here energy density does not have a specific number. And here, what percentage of diesel is actually mixed in. So you're actually using less than 1% of petroleum diesel. So here it says biodiesel's main competitor. Biodiesel is generally way higher priced than they price their diesel. It's quite a bit higher, biodiesel. And generally you get that 12% lower, and you're not going to get, I think the Seton rating's not, is just a little bit higher than regular diesel. So basically here, I asked why should you use it, and they said that California released some legislation that they need to drop their carbon intensity of fuels by 20% by 2030, but Propel has already met 70% drop by 2015, and they're still working on more and more fuels. They're actually working on an algae fuel, I believe. So why does it serve a place in everyday consumers, not prosumers? Is that everybody can run Propel fuels inside of their diesel engines. And then here, diesel HPR is the lowest carbon fuel available today, and I asked why was this mix? Why did they think it was good? It's basically it has the lowest carbon fuel. And here I said, how is the fuel manufactured? And this is where they mentioned that they found a way to refine it, that it is nearly that is chemically composed almost identical to petroleum. So they meet all the requirements by the engine manufacturer. And here is talking about hydrotreating, which is the process that they use. It says renewable oil molecules are split into separate chains, creating hydrocarbon, which is the same thing that petroleum is made out of, and nearly identical to conventional diesel fuels. So yeah, how are you guys innovating when they are continually focused on bringing low carbon fuels to every market in California? So they're continuing to innovate, and like I said, I believe I saw on their website that they're working on algae-based or other microbe-based fuel. So that's basically it on this video, talking about earth-friendly fuels. So I do plan on running some sort of B20 or B80, B100, something like that, whatever I could find pumped around me in San Jose and the Bay Area. Fuels as well, to see the gas mileage on those. But right now I'm liking this fuel. I think that it is a good option for a lot of people looking for a fuel that is greener and better for the environment, doesn't smell as intense, and will help give their car maybe a little bit less vibrations, which I found with my car, it gives a little bit less vibrations, and no drop in fuel economy. So if you're in California and you're looking for a fuel to try out on your unmodified diesel car or truck, this is definitely a fuel to try out. So this has been Steven from Steven's Classic Garage. I'd like to thank you guys for watching. If you like this video, please subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Take it easy. Peace.